Well, hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming back for another video here at Gideonstactical. We have a real special format today as we have with us as a guest, Jim McNair from Kershaw Knives, and he's one of their designers over there. And we're going to be taking a look at a bunch of their new 2021 models, both from Kershaw and Zero Tolerance. So thanks so much for joining us today and doing this video with us. We really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Looking forward to it.
Cool. So why don't you tell us just real quick a little bit about yourself, how long maybe you've been working at Kershaw, and how'd you get into designing knives?
Okay. Well, let's see. I do design for Kershaw, obviously, and I've been here for actually 10 years as of last year. So
awesome. Congrats.
Working on 11.
Yeah.
And if they keep me. And yeah, so I mean, how to get into designing knives? I got lucky. I mean, I've always been into knives since I was a kid. I mean, I literally used to read the Blade magazine, the other knife magazines, and I would go down to the basement and cut them out of wood. I mean,
oh wow, sweet.
used to make toy knives when I was a kid, and I never really thought that would become a career, and just ended up out of luck getting onto that path, and here we are today.
Awesome. That's really cool. That's a cool story. Well, and it's awesome when you get to do what you love and express, you know, the artistic stuff inside of you in a way that not only you get to experience, but tons of people get to use and, you know, get to rely on. It's pretty cool, I bet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a knife geek, so I love doing this.
Right. Awesome. Well, then you're in the right place. So let's go ahead and not belabor it and jump right in. And I got to say right out of the gate, these first knives that we're going to look at, can I just say ridiculous? I mean, these things, the Strata and this is the XL, and then the regular. I mean, the regular is big enough. The XL, it's so cool to see a knife brand, you know, breaking into the big pocket knives. You know, there are a couple brands out there that do it that we all know, but tell us a little bit about this Strata XL and the Strata and just kind of what went into the thought process of going with mega pocket knives.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that is based on loosely based on the concept of like a Spanish Navaja, which tends to be a very oversized knife. They're big. They have a bit of that nice curvature. The handle's very sleek. It's a very modern interpretation of that. But I mean, that's the inescapable thing about these is they're huge.
Right.
This is a 5.5-inch blade, and the standard Strata is a 4.25-inch blade.
Wow.
But the thing about this is you can make a really big knife, and it's really easy if you're not careful to make it bulky and difficult to carry. And my favorite thing about these is that they are not. They're actually nice and light. Oh, I shouldn't say it. Well, they're not light, but they're surprisingly light for how big they are, but they're nice and slim. The blade stock is actually relatively slim in spite of being so big. And so you combine that with a high flat grind, and they're actually excellent slicers. They're really usable. I got to give credit, and I wish I remember who said it. Somebody pointed out, I think it was the guy who actually works in the factory here and grinds our blades. He said, you know, you could almost use it as a camp kitchen knife.
Yeah, absolutely.
That big, you could use this for food prep. But that being said, again, they're with the G10 front handle, they're relatively light. They both have D2 blades with bead blast finish, G10 front scale, and then we have an aluminum inlay with a kind of a copper colored finish. Yeah,
I loved the copper accents all throughout, and even that little near the pivot, that like cover of the pivot. I mean, it's like some kind of, you know, like wing, I don't know, like a dragonfly wing kind of feel to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the copper colored tube spacers as well. And then we have an inlay on the back as well. And that's actually functioning as an over travel stop for the line. A deep carry pocket clip. And amazingly enough, I mean, I'll say it probably won't work with girl jeans, but sorry, ladies. But at least in my hillbilly jeans, I can put this all the way to the bottom of my pocket, which is a genuine surprise to me when we got them. So I'm kind of, I can't help but smile when I pick up the XL. That's the one that kind of makes me smile. But I will say, like, even the small one is can't call it small, but even this one, even the regular Strata is a 4.25-inch blade. And this one carries I've carried this one around a fair amount, and it's really nice. It's a really comfortable size. And then you've just got so much blade to work with.
Right. Yeah. And I'll be honest, like when I got to use these, you know, I'm rolling in a bunch of the B-roll as we're kind of talking here. Like you said, the grinding is really well done in that very high saber grind. gives you the ability to have a very good slicing capability. And I carried this all day in my pocket, thinking to myself, when you first look at it, you're like, this is gonna be ridiculous. How is this even gonna like fit inside the pocket? But I didn't even really realize I had a pocket knife on like a much smaller, version or model would be. So it is, for how ginormous it is, very carryable, which is really cool.
And I think that's the key. So, and they're a bit of an upgraded knife for us. So they are going to be the big fella, the XL is going to be $119.95 or 99. Okay. And then the less big one is going to be $99.99.
And those are MSRP prices.
MSRP, correct? So they will be significantly cheaper than that when you get them out to retail.
Well, that's still like a lot of knife, for what you're paying for, which is awesome. And what's really cool, what I liked, is that these are manual, so that's pretty sweet. And what type of bearings are they? Are they on bearings, or is it bronze?
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. They are KELTY ball bearing washers, so they are nice and smooth. They have that real smooth. Again, in spite of being so big, you can still flip them.
Right.
And that's a trick with a knife that big. You'll see I've got no wrist action at all, and just it opens beautifully. It gets enough inertia on that blade that it goes.
Yeah, it's very nice and smooth. Cool. Well, do you have anything else on those models, or should we jump to the next one?
Let's jump to the next one.
Okay. Let's see here. The next one is that we're going to look at is the Highball XL. So this is a larger version of one that you guys have designed before, correct?
It's a larger version, and it actually is a new design. It's just in the same family. You could say these are like siblings or cousins. They share some features. For example, they both have this big long groove in the blade. They're non-flipper knives.
Right.
They are thumb openers. They both run on the KVT ball bearing washers.
Manual. So another
manual action.
That's something that I noticed as I was just looking through all of these. It seems like it's the year of the frame lock, for sure. I think almost all of these that we're about to look at are frame locks, but also the D2 steel is something that I noticed on almost every single model that we're about to look at from Kershaw, which is a nice upgrade. Really, really cool to see that coming out. And that with this one, I don't know how we want to describe it. It's kind of like a fuller, but it acts as the deployment feature. Is so nice. It was so easy to use. I loved it.
Well, and the other thing it does is that when this slips into your pocket, if a lot of times if you have thumb studs, you can kind of hang up on them, and it slides right in and out. Much nicer with just having that smooth blade on there. It really helps just for carryability. So yeah, we have blue PVD parts on here. We also have this little inlay on the back, which is partially acting as an over travel stop, and partially the intent is to give you kind of a fidgety place to put your fingers to help you as you open that knife, to keep your fingers off the lock bar. Which I'm left-handed, so I'm trying not to drop this on the microphone right now, but it works really nicely. And again, running on the KVT ball bearing washers, even as a thumb opener, we went back and forth on this idea, but it's so slick. I mean, it just feels like it's just like glass, and it's really nice to have that smooth. It's really pleasant to sit there and open and close it. Right. I'm really happy with how this works.
And the fact that you guys put it on both sides, so it's completely ambidextrous for you being a lefty. I'm sure you appreciate, and not just being stuck, just on one side, is really nice.
Yeah. So that's the Highball XL, and MSRP on this one is $79.99. So even with the D2 steel, I think that's a pretty good. It's going to be a pretty good price point when we get these out at retail.
Right. Yeah, and even just something to note before we move on, just even the little attention to detail, again, that blue on the back spacer there, but also something a lot of brands overlook will be like the recessed screws around the pocket clip. It can be very difficult, to get it fully, into your pocket. So the fact that this is recessed is very nice. So it'll go all the way in with that deep loop over, pocket clip.
Yeah, it doesn't always work out on every model, but having those flat head screws in there does make a difference. It gives you more room for your hands to fit into the.
It's nice. All righty, so now we got some cleavers, and hopefully I'm doing this right. The bracket and the static, right? The static, I think, is a model that was released last year. Is that right? The smaller one.
Static is an existing model,
right?
And it's frame lock and it has steel handles, the gray finish. And then the bracket, it's nice we're laying them together because they are actually different sizes. You can see better on screen there that I'm trying to hold them nicely, but the bracket is significantly larger. It's actually about a 1/2 inch longer in the blade.
Right.
So, and again, it's a slightly different design. The blades are very similar, really almost the same, but the handle shape has actually been updated a little bit. And then we do have this steel inlay. We have in this case, a G10 textured glass-filled nylon handle.
Okay.
And then on the back side, we have a steel frame lock, again, with that similar kind of look and feel to the original bracket.
Right. Well, and what I found was when I was messing with them and using them, and I even like the little accent of jimping up there on the bracket, that you can really do like a nice pinch move, get your finger in on that choil and then do a really good slice, really good cut, if you're maybe doing some work around the kitchen or something like that. I really like that point of it. And they did slice very, very nicely for this type of style. So I was really connecting with that. And it was interesting too, because this new one, full size handle and then that full size choil. And then this one is assisted, right? This has the speed safe on it.
It is. And that's a good thing to point out. The original bracket is a manual action running on ball bearing washers.
Right.
And this one is assisted. So
different.
I will say, the cleaver thing, yes, you can see they're a little wide. That's the nature of the beast, but having that low tip is super functional, super useful. And like you said, that jimping up here is very effective for precision stuff, even just slicing a box or doing something delicate. I mean, sometimes, like example, even opening a box where there's something soft inside and you don't want to cut it. You have a lot of control to be real careful with that, with your finger up there on the blade, and you can have a lot more control of your depth of cut. So that's the bracket. Really nice piece.
Yeah, and I like that tip, even though it is a cleaver. Sometimes some of those cleavers to try and open like a packaging is very difficult just because of the way they were built. That it does have a little bit of a point there that it is pretty easy to puncture packaging and that type of stuff.
Yeah. And so this one has an MSRP of $64.99.
Okay, cool. Right on. All right. So at this point, we're going to jump into the ZT line here for a little bit and take a look at a few zero tolerances. Why don't I know you have one that I wasn't able to get my hands on, but why don't you start off with that model and just tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. Yeah. So unfortunately, we didn't have a whole lot of samples of this. We're working very hard on them. This is the 0762. So this is this is kind of the new flagship ZT, I guess I'd call it. This is probably the fanciest one we're making right now. It does have carbon fiber handles, CPM 20 CV blade with a real nice satin finish that unfortunately just doesn't show up well on the camera. The lighting makes it a little difficult.
Yeah, satin's the worst to work with on a camera for sure.
But it's a beautiful, clean, precisely ground blade. This one is running on KVT ball bearing washers, so it's very, very slick and smooth to open. You can see we have a subframe lock on the backside and a bent titanium pocket clip, as well as titanium tube spacers, and all those parts are anodized blue. And then the front side is really where kind of the magic happens on this knife. So some of you may be familiar with our tuned detent system. So we've taken where we normally would have the ball bearing sunk into the lock bar on the back and have a hole in the back side of the blade. In this case, we have a separate liner on the front that controls the detent, and then we have a hole in the front side of the blade. And that allows us to tune that detent in and make it perfect for what it needs to be.
Nice.
So it also gives the option where you don't have to. We've done a lot, actually. We've made this whole kind of recess for your fingers to sit in, but you can lay your fingers on the bar and the knife will still open. That's really the beauty of the tuned detent system, is it prevents you from being able to press on to be able to push the lock the ball bearing down into the hole.
Yeah, and then it's so difficult to open and overcome that detent.
Yeah. So on the front side here, what you're seeing is that the blue layer is a titanium liner that we've added to kind of give it a cool look and a feel. It gives it that layered approach, and then that silver piece underneath that you see is part of that tuned detent bar. The actual little detent finger is underneath the carbon fiber here, so you can't ever touch it.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah, it's a really cool new piece. It's about a 3.5-inch blade, and MSRP in this is going to be $400. So that's the
Gotcha.
0762.
Sweet. All right. Well, this next one is wild, I gotta say. This one we're looking at is the ZT990.
Correct.
Wow. My boys are like really into sharks right now. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and with, you know, they see a lot of the stuff that I get. And when this came in, my son goes, "That's like a mako shark," which is the fastest shark in the world, apparently, according to what my son watches on National Geographic. So, I mean, this is just wicked on every single level. And I think right out of the gate, you might want to touch on this. The floating, I believe you guys call it like a bridge stop bar, right?
Yeah, you know, and that's just kind of my way of describing it. But yes, exactly. It's kind of a floating bridge. So instead of being all connected here at the handle, this is actually cantilevered out there. And so these steel liners are actually pinching the stop pin, and you see it's got a couple little screws here to keep it all together. But in spite of being that open construction, it's very rigid. This doesn't bend or move side to side or up and down. So it feels like any other knife. It's very secure. The lockup is great. You don't initiate any up and down play because of this feature.
Right.
And I keep touching on this. That's why these liners are made out of steel. They're made out of steel because that's the stiffest, strongest material we could use in this case. Titanium is great, and there's lots of wonderful applications for it. Just this long, skinny bridge, we were concerned that would have too much flex. And so in this case,
Gotcha.
we made it out of steel. And they're beautifully machined, and it's one of those things where you carry this knife, unless you're sticking a magnet on it, I don't feel like the average person is going to notice much difference because it's really not very heavy. It's still remarkably light, even with that extra steel overlay on the front. But I'm really happy with how this, personally, I'm happy with how this knife turned out. I mean, the 999 was always was kind of an art piece, and it was big. It was a 3 3/4 inch blade, and it was wider than this actually. So even though this is a scaled down version, we've also taken this and narrowed it significantly. So the knife is just overall, this is a better carry knife, and it's available.
Oh yeah, definitely like a gentleman, like very classy, but very like carryable, but still has, you know, that performance with that pretty large blade. How long is that blade? Is that like 3 1/4?
About 3 3/4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I say this all the time. I tend to find that to be kind of a magic size. It fits most people's hands well, even for a large hand. It's a 4-finger grip, but it's not so big as to scare people or to be uncomfortable to carry.
Right. Right. Something else even that I noticed with blade, you know, a lot of times something that I look for when I'm going through like cardboard is that, you know, do big gaps, big holes, does the cardboard fall into it, bind up, you know, cause a problem with like slicing? And that wasn't the case when I was going through all the cardboard using that. So I was really happy with that it didn't bind up or have any issues. So just the way the grinding is flares it away from that hole enough that it doesn't bind up in any way, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so it's a fun design. There's a few features, like if anyone notices that there's a silver pivot on the back here, that's going to be black. These two are prototypes, but they're extremely close to production. The production knife is going to look exactly like this. And then we have the zero tolerance logo. It's going to be molded into the back spacer there. So again, my lighting is not
I saw
any
that,
favors, but hopefully we can get a good shot of that where we can see it. So overall, just a fun piece. Again, very much really staying true to the original design of the 999, but making it a little more affordable and a lot more easy to carry and comfortable. So I'm really excited about what was in that regard.
What was the steel on the blade?
It's going to be 20 CV.
20
so
CV.
In the ZT line, I know it probably comes off as boring. And what it really comes down to is that we decided several years ago that ZT is a premium brand. We're not going to use anything but the best steel, even for the knives that are a little more workmanlike. So even like the 357, which I've personally described as being like a work truck with vinyl seats and rubber floors, but it still has a 20 CV blade. It's still got the 454 under the hood. So
right. That's a good way to describe that.
Or a 460 for the Ford guys.
There you go. Right on. Okay, and then the next one, I know that this is really just kind of more of like a color combination upgrade, if I'm correct. On the 0308. I know this came out last year. I haven't put a full review out on it yet, but just tell us a little bit about some of the updates and just the knife in general.
Yeah. So this is the same knife that came out last year, and functionally, materials wise, it hasn't changed. But the original knife that we came out with last year had the tan G10 handle, the Coyote tan, and a stonewash blade, and a bead blasted back handle. And the original 0300 series, we always did them with a tiger stripe. We had versions with the black G10 and the black PVD handle. And so we felt like that it was appropriate to do a version like this. And I think this one's going to do really well. I mean, I'm not even a tiger stripe guy, and I'm really drawn to this knife. For some
really,
reason,
man? Like I was going to say that I love the tiger striping that you guys do on the ZT and the Kershaws. For sure, that pattern has always connected with me, even before I started this channel long ago. It's really
most
really
people
sweet.
do. I'm the exception to the rule with that.
Sure.
But this one, I can't explain why, but this one, it's funny. I remember, we were looking at these and we're working on them, and I got to give our marketing team credit. They took this photo of this sitting on an olive green ammo can. It's in the catalog. And
awesome.
I don't know what it is about that photo. I just went, oh, that looks really nice. And
right.
I think, I should stop babbling and just tell you the specs, but the black G10 looks really nice.
Yeah.
We have, this blade is a little different than the old 300 series. Those used to be a DLC finish that was tiger striped. This is actually a black oxide that's been black washed. This is actually a black wash finish that has been tiger striped, and it actually is. It's very tough. It's remarkably. We did a lot of testing before we went with this finish, and it works out well.
Yeah.
The back of the handle, I want to be clear because it can be confusing when you're dealing with lots of finishes. This is a DLC finish on the back of the handle, so that is going to be really tough. It's going to hold up really well on the titanium side. And then, and you can't black oxide titanium from a technical standpoint. So that has something to do with it. But I mean, otherwise it's comfortable. It is big, it's not the lightest thing we make, but again, I don't feel like it's a boat anchor.
Right.
And,
it feels like on some level, as I was carrying it around in the pocket, it, like you said, sure, it's not, ultra light under 3 ounces, but when you open it, you're like, I feel not only with like the width of the handle, but also just the broadness of the blade. Like I have a fixed blade in my pocket. It's like, I have a very robust tool here that I can really beat on, use hard, and I know it's going to keep on kicking. It's how I felt when I was like using it, and had it in the pocket, and then, using it for the different tasks I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's remarkable because I mean, it's just all those features that make it feel like that. It just feels really overbuilt. And to that extent, I mean, we still have the solid pivot on this instead of a hollow pivot. It is a solid steel, very thick, solid steel pivot. And then this end is actually a nut rather than a screw that turns onto that pivot. And again, as we pointed on the old version, this is made to fit a 1/2 inch combo wrench. So if you have a 1/2 inch wrench, or even if you can get your hands on an adjustable wrench, like a crescent wrench, you can adjust this in the field or wherever you happen to be with very minimal tools.
Yeah, and I think I saw the spec. That area right here is a 1/4 inch thick. I mean, that's how thick and robust this pivot area is.
It's a 1/4 inch or just under it. I can't. Yeah. I'm having a moment, and I can't remember if it's
you're good.
0.25 or 0.218, but it's beefy. It's beefier than normal. It's going to hold up. The pivot's not going to be the problem on this knife.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. That is for sure. Cool. Well, right on. And did you hit price point with us on that one?
I did not. You're right. Okay. MSRP on this is $400.
Right on. Okay, sweet. Cool. Well, before we jump back over to Kershaw and the rest of the items that we're going to look at today, yesterday I posted a video on Instagram and just kind of threw it up there. Hey, anyone who has some questions, throw them down. We got a couple of questions. So we're going to do 2 today that hopefully you'll have some answers for. So the first one, and again, I apologize. As you guys know here on the channel, I'm not the best at pronunciation of names and things. So if I butcher your name from your Instagram handle, I apologize. But I believe it's Koi or Caio Sanchez, who he asked, who decides on the blade material used in the final product, the designer or the company? How does that process work?
So that actually ends up being a team decision, and it's between the design team and the sales team. And it's interesting to note that, we are a sales driven company, and that sounds, It sounds funny until you think about it for a minute, because we try really hard to listen to our customers. And so that means that we do listen when you talk on social media, when you send us emails, when we meet you unfortunately, we're not going to shows this year, but we meet a lot of people at shows, particularly Blade Show. We get a lot of feedback and we try to listen to that. But the other big metric of that is that people will say a lot of things, and I'm not saying that anyone is, saying things and not backing it up, but when people actually put their money on the table and they buy it. And so when I say that, we look at the sales numbers and we say what's doing well and what's not, because in my mind, if you're actually willing to go out and buy it, that says a lot, as well as what we talk about at shows and things like that. And so we talk to our sales team. We say, what's doing well? What do we think needs to be higher end? What do we think needs to be more affordable? And so that sort of stuff tends to dictate the steels. We don't use a real wide variety of steels. We try to use what we can effectively get our hands on. So you'll see a lot of HCR13 on the import products. You'll see a lot of D2 on the import products. And then on the US side, we're using a variety of things now, either 14C28N. We use some S35VN, and then on the ZT side, well, automatics, we use CPM 154. Right. And then on the ZT side, we pretty much exclusively use 20 CV right now. Right. CPM 20 CV. So I don't know if I answered the question very well, but we as a team decide what makes sense for the product, and the price point it's going to be at, and really what the customer wants and needs. But usually really on a sales side before we get to production.
Sure. And I just, as an example, I know for years I've been saying like, hey, I'd love to see certain designs, a little bit of an upgrade over HCR when possible, D2, that type of stuff. And as we're seeing here today, almost all of the Kershaw line have been upgraded to D2, and with not too much of a price, increase, which is really nice. So you're going to be getting that higher edge retention, but you're still getting these really, sweet designs. So that's just cool to see that. When I saw all these, I'm like, wow, these are almost all D2. That's really, really cool to see that. So even me as a consumer, it's nice to see you guys as a company seeing like, okay, how can we hit a price point that people are going to buy, but giving the best deal possible for that price point.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Alrighty. And then we'll do one more here. And this one's from Jason Bascott. And he asks, what goes into designing a Kershaw knife, and is more thought put into the look of the knife or into utilitarian aspects of the knife when Kershaw builds it out? And that was something kind of close to what I was going to ask as well. Is it function over design, or is it design over function? Like, hey, here's a cool design. Now, how can we make it work? Or is it, this is what it needs to do. Now, how can we make it look good?
So it's a little of both.
Yeah.
So it depends on the knife. Function is always important, and we are real careful to make sure up front that the knife is going to be comfortable, that it's going to be usable. It's not going to hot spots in the handle. Like, for example, I mean, if I was to take like, say like this finger groove and put it too far forward, too far back, it would land in the middle of one of my fingers.
Right.
Functionally, that's bad. We do the best we can to average hand size and things like that. But functionally, if the knife doesn't feel good in the hand, we don't want to move forward with it. We're not just designing art pieces here. Right. That being said, sometimes when you're talking about something that's more of an EDC piece that you're going to do light things with, you're not necessarily going to sit and carve. Like anyone who's carved a stick just to roast a marshmallow, it's a different kind of using of a knife than what you do every day around your house. You actually are pushing it a lot more firmly into your hand. You're going to find out within a minute or two whether that knife is actually comfortable, or whether you're going to find those hot spots right away. Right. And so we worry less about that on something where it's meant to be kind of an everyday carry that's going to see more light use and more detailed stuff than something like, like even on like the 308 is a good example where this has to be comfortable. It has to be grippy. The G10 has a heavy texture on it to make sure that it doesn't slip in your hand. And so there are lots of examples like that, particularly like machetes, where the function has to come first of the comfort and the usage. And then we do a lot of things that are sort of subtle. I'm not really answering the question. I
Yeah,
know
you're good. Yeah,
there are
no,
some
I think
knives where
that helps.
the function is always important.
Yeah.
And comfort and ergonomics are always important, but they're more important in certain applications.
Sure.
There are also things where we do a lot of higher flat grinds these days. We try to make the blade a better slicer.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I don't care for, it's where you have a grind that's too low, particularly on a flat grind.
Yeah.
And then your bevel angles end up being like this, and you just start getting to this really thick blade really quick. So we want them to be thin enough, particularly with the grinds, to be usable. And so you'll see a lot more of these high grinds and these high grind panels on a lot of our knives. And that's in an effort to make the knife slice well and cut well, because that's what it does.
Right. That's always a headache of mine, is when I do get a model from, a particular brand or something, and right out of the gate, you're like, what happened here? And it's because the grind was just brought down. You're like, it's not cutting. That's kind of what it's supposed to do, number one. So obviously that's good. And as me being a user, I always appreciate those high grinds. So even on all of these models here, those higher flat saber grinds do really perform well in a lot of different tasks.
Yeah. So, I mean, perfect example. I mean, I don't think this is a bad thing. I mean, this knife, very arty.
Right.
There's a lot of, this is a heavy design piece, and it works fine. And I'm sure somebody's going to come back to me and say, oh, I use that for camping and cutting sticks and digging in the mud. But this is a little bit more form than it is function in this case. But it's still comfortable. It still fits the hand. It still has good ergonomics, and it still has a very usable blade. So I don't feel so bad about that. It's going to do 90% of what you want to do with a knife. And if you want to go real crazy, pick up a different one.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks for answering those questions. And we'll go ahead and bounce back here to a couple more of the Kershaws. And this next one, I think is super cool. There's an aspect that I found with this that just really connected with me. And this is the collateral right here.
Yeah.
This one is a speed safe. And what I love right out of the gate is the fact that you have the hidden recessed flipper on the bottom.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That I saw right away. But the way it's designed up front, it's like almost hidden. So at first I was like, oh man, am I going to be like slipping off of this all the time? But the way it's cut in and designed, every single time I went to go hit it, I never slipped off. And then it's, it gives this really cool design, as we were just talking about. Design, you don't have this big opposite, fin sticking out, and it really has a good flow to the design.
Yeah, and that's definitely kind of the goal of this knife. This was meant to have that kind of sleek look and be a little more different, and it even gives you a little more room for your fingers on that handle, because you can just roll right up to the front.
Right.
So it's true, you don't have that finger guard, and some people like that feature, but most of our knives have that. So I don't think most people are going to have a problem with the fact that this one hides away and has a real sleek look. I love the carbon fiber inlay, just kind of hiding the pivot and giving it a real clean appearance. We updated the blade on this a little bit. This is a model that we released. I keep kind of eating crow on this one. We released this model with a little bit different opening mechanism several years back, and the factory just struggled with it and had a really hard time with it. And so we changed it up. We updated on this one. We updated the blade, and we changed it to having this minimal flipper, and I'm really happy with the result. I mean, we loved what we were doing with the old mechanism. I wish it would have worked out, but I'm really happy with how this came out. And I don't feel like it's particularly a downgrade. It's just it's a different way of doing things. And you're right, that jimping on the front of that is key. You get just enough grip. We've carved away a little bit of the handle there to give you a little more room. And the other thing about this knife is that this is an odd case where it is speed safe assisted. It is an assisted opening knife, but we've also used the KVT ball bearing washers in it. And so,
okay, nice.
You don't necessarily feel it because you're feeling the torsion bar, but when you go to open it, it's frictionless, and it just opens with authority and snaps every time.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's got a D2 blade, again, a bit of an upgrade on this one, gray PVD on the handles, and in this case, a real slim lock bar cut to give it that sort of high-end feel. And this has an MSRP of $79.99. So really, again, I think a lot of bang for the buck on this knife.
Right. And what's cool too, and what was this, probably a glass reinforced nylon spacer in the back?
Yep.
Or G10?
Yep.
Yeah,
it's glass filled
so
nylon.
right. And so with all the video, you know, that I'm rolling in for you guys to see, I was carving sticks, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, and I was curious. I'm like, is this going to cause, you know, a gap because there's that space there? You know, I'm sure people were thinking that, but I didn't notice it at all. So even under harder pressure cuts, it doesn't feel like you're missing any material on that back, and it gave enough support on the rear end that I was able to really put some good pressure on that and use the knife. So I really like that aspect as well, but giving you that kind of cool, I don't know, just larger, you could use it as a lanyard hole if you wanted to, I guess, feel back there.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So now we're down to 2 left. Let's do the Cannonball. This one is real interesting. So I'll be honest, when I was looking at what was going to be coming to me, this was the one originally I was kind of like, the least interested in, because from the profile to the side, it looks just like a monster. I mean, it looks like the Iron Giant's pocket knife. You know, I mean, that's what he had running around. I'm like, I don't know about that. But when you look at it this way, it is one of the thinner models you guys are releasing this year. And I think this was the best slicer that I used out of all the ones that you guys sent. I mean, the thinner stock and then the edge geometry that you guys went with is pretty sweet. So talk to us a little bit about that, and just kind of, I don't know, it's like this, hey, look at this big monster, but then you put it sideways and you're like, whoa, this is very carryable and very slicey.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, this knife is a perfect example of where we have had a kind of a different direction in our design in the last few years, where we've gone with a lot narrower, slimmer knives. And even this one is not quite that narrow, but this is a bit different. This is more like what we used to do, which is a lot of these really wide knives. It's a bit like I think this one's a bit like a Blur in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. It's just a little bit more beefy. It's hand filling, again, easily full size grip with even a little more room for even bigger. I've got big hands, but there's even more room on this handle.
Right.
It has frame lock. It has that really high flat grind, like we were just talking about a few minutes ago on the design side. Like we have that super high grind, and again, it just makes it slice really nicely when the blade stock isn't super thick.
Right.
You know, I'll be honest, we're not trying to build a pry bar here. We're trying to build a knife. And so in this case, it was going to cut really well, and that wide blade is real functional. We also have a deep carry pocket clip that's reversible and kind of a small, different style. So a little bit of a different look to that.
Mm-hmm.
Assisted opening, and we have kind of the fun steel inlay in the front of the handle.
Yeah.
But again, it's another one with a D2 blade, black wash finish, and $79.99 MSRP.
Nice.
And so it's like when Koyo was asking about steel before, like this one just happened to be at a price point where we said, you know, we're gonna upgrade the blade. We think this is kind of a fun, little bit more of a step up knife, and maybe even a bit more of an enthusiast style knife. And so we're gonna go with that higher end blade steel on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Sweet.
Felt right for the product.
Right on. Okay. And then I figured, I was looking at the names last night, thinking of like the order of how we would do this. And I was like, how could we not end on the end game? Right. I mean, that just, on every level just makes sense to me. So what's really interesting is, I mean, I don't know if they're all different materials. I think it's either glass reinforced nylon and G10, and we got stainless steel, it looks like. And I was going to ask you, maybe before you talk about this knife a little bit, what is your favorite handle material? Like, you left to your own, you know, whatever you're doing, you're going to design a knife and you want the handle material just on your own. What is your favorite material to use?
Oh man, that's tough.
I know.
Titanium or carbon fiber. I mean,
okay, sweet.
One of the two, and we use them in concert a lot, but I'm a fan of both. I'm a fan of the bomb-proof nature of a titanium knife. It's just so tough, but at the same time, a carbon fiber knife can be, especially with a subframe lock, can be super light in a relatively large knife.
Right.
So I'm not really.
So hey, there you
I'm
go.
not committing.
Your answer is like titanium overlaid with carbon fiber. There's your answer right there.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to pin me down for everyday carry, I'd say carbon fiber.
Okay.
I like how light it is. Right on. And strong.
So yeah, so tell us a little bit about the end game here and what we're looking at, because we've got a lot of wild stuff going on with that handle.
Absolutely. And the end game is, again, it's a very heavy, I'm sorry, kids wake me up a lot, and it's fun.
I have a 2 and a 4-year-old. I totally get it.
The end game is a real heavy design piece. It's one of my favorites that we've come out with this year. And so we have steel overlays here and here that have a bronze coating on them. This is going to be a glass filled nylon insert. It just molds in there and fits and goes so beautifully in. And we have a steel liner underneath. On the back side, we have that bronze colored insert again made out of steel, reversible deep carry pocket clip, fun blade profile with a stonewash finish. And it's a manual running on KVT ball bearing washers. And it's an everyday carry knife. I hate to say there's not a lot to say functionally. It's
Sure.
your average, comfortable, kind of gentlemanly carry. It's got a real cool look to it. I think it's kind of a conversation starter. You pull this out and open a box and people are going to be, what's that?
Right.
And just real pleased with how this looks and how it turned out. And then this will have this has a D2 blade again. I think I might have mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got that upgrade to it and an MSRP of $99.99. So
sweet.
Yeah, just a fun knife with a lot going on. And again, more of an enthusiast platform. So we wanted to upgrade that to the D2.
Right. Oh yeah, no, it definitely has that kind of like Blade Runner, I don't know, cyberpunk feel to that design in that handle, which is pretty cool. It makes it definitely, like you said, stand out from the crowd when you're, opening that package. It'll get people talking, well, whoa, what's that? Hey, let me check that out. So that's sweet. I like that. Cool. Well, that's it for the models that we had today to look at. I have to say again, Jim, thank you so much for joining us and just walking us through these designs. I think there's a lot to offer, not only through zero tolerance, but also with Kershaw that I think I know myself, man, I'm just going to come back to this here one more time. This freaking is so crazy cool. So yeah, super sweet. Excited to see a lot of this stuff. And I know many of these blades I'm going to do full reviews on, throughout the year because they are connecting with me for sure. So thanks so much for joining us today. Yeah, there you go. Boom. That'll be a good thumbnail right there. For all of those of you watching, thanks so much for joining us. Invite you to subscribe if you haven't yet. Check out the other video popping up. Until next time, always remember, stay equipped, stay prepared, and we'll see you out there.